Howdy mates, how are we doing today? Here's a part 3 video, but this time it's going to focus a bit more on a discussion, more or less. So, I just came from a decent kayaking trip, so I just needed to take a little break, but as part of this video I've been reading about a particular topic that I feel should be mentioned highly, as a matter of fact. So, I'm going to mention a little bit about the concept of the three sisters. Now, some of you may be like, okay, what about these three sisters? Well, it really pertains to horticulture and gardening, and even just the natural world in general. So, the three sisters are made up of crops called corn, beans, and squash. Now, I know that it's quite general when I say that. So, typically when it comes to beans, I'm going to talk a little bit about pole beans. That's the specific type. Now, corn, we all know what that is, of course. And then when it comes to squash, we're most familiar with zucchini and yellow squash. These are our most common types that we consume. Sorry about that. This is really noisy. But going back on the subject, the three sisters really come hand in hand with each other. And it's usually one of the most fundamental exercises when it comes to gardening especially. This was highly practiced among most indigenous nations that existed here. So, we're going to first start off with the first big sister, which is corn. Usually, the oldest sister is usually the most dominant, the one in charge, and is usually the one who makes up most of the support. So corn, what it is capable of doing is establishing itself via adventitious roots in the ground. That grackle's being really noisy. So since they're capable of establishing into the ground, very much so, they can grow quite upright, as long as you have healthy corn, of course. So really, the corn helps provide for the structure. But then, the second sister, which is the beans, they play another role. They're like the middle sister. So they're, essentially having to still, provide a role to help benefit the other sisters, of course. But the beans, I honestly think they're probably the most important sister, as they are the middle child, essentially. The beans, what they're capable of doing is, they have a particular bacteria that is in their roots. It's like a symbiotic relationship. The bacteria is something called rhizobium. Now, what these rhizobium do is, which I'll explain in a second, most plants, like corn, for instance, needs nitrogen. However, though, the misconception is when we say nitrogen, many of us may think of the atmospheric nitrogen. But here's the difference. Most plants, they can't take in pure atmospheric nitrogen. It's because it's not suitable. What has to happen is they have to have mineral nitrogen. So, what I mean by that, as an example of mineral nitrogen can be ammonium and even nitrate. So, and I'm sure many of you who are familiar with with gardening, those are some of those most important compounds needed to sustain a garden. So what these rhizobium bacteria do in the roots of these beans, they're capable of converting that atmospheric nitrogen into that mineral nitrogen. Hence, that can allow corn to grow quite effectively. And in turn, the corn provides a structure for the beans so that they're not easily picked by any predators that feed on them. It makes it a bit more of a challenge. And it allows them to get adequate sunlight. So then the last sister, the baby sister, the one who doesn't have as much to prove, but still plays a role, is our squash. Now, oftentimes, the squash, it's a ground-dwelling plant. It doesn't really grow as upright like the other plants do. But since they don't have as much to prove, they have a little bit of leniency. So what they do, typically, once the leaves of a squash fall off, those leaves have a chance of decomposing into the soil, in a sense, creating that organic soil and natural fertilizer without using chemicals, of course. And with that being said, too, they have adventitious roots. So that's the point. It's like, even though you're seeing the plant above the soil, there's still a lot of action going on underground that we're not even seeing, but yet it's happening. No different than the mycelium network when it comes to fungus, which I can save that for a separate video. So in turn, all three of those crops, or the three sisters, they all benefit from each other. And they exercise something called reciprocity. So what that means is it's a give and take relationship, but nothing is lost. So, like the corn, for instance, uses up the nitrogen, or the mineral nitrogen, ammonium and nitrate, but in return, the beans help replenish it. And then those other nutrients, the squash, also enables that replenishment as well. So, and the squash helps provide moist soil that has a little more water content. So when it comes to reciprocity, is when you receive something, you give something in return for a mutual benefit. It's almost like a symbiotic relationship in a sense. So I feel that needs to be applied in life more often. Is with reciprocity, nothing is wasted. Everything is used and is also replenished at the same time. So that's why, for instance, modern agriculture, even though a lot of monoculture does happen, that's why there's something called crop rotation. because if you were to use corn 2 years in a row, your second year of corn would not be as compatible and would most likely not mature as well. So that's why every alternating year they'll switch between corn and soybeans to replenish. But that's the point. Nothing's wasted. And it's amazing how nature is capable of doing that. And we ought to learn from that. So, some of you may be wondering, like, how did I really learn this? Well, for those of you who don't know, when I was in high school and even going to college, I was actually, in high school, I was involved with FFA, and then in college, I was in an internship where I was providing community gardens. And I gotta say, since I've moved down here, I've really been missing gardening. And the word of advice, if you ever want to feel a real connection to nature, gardening is an excellent means of doing so. So thanks you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and hope this gives a little bit of an ecological lesson for those of you who may be a bit new to gardening. Even in a sense, I'm still kind of new to it, but I have a little bit of experience with it.
That stuff's like spongy, huh?
It's alright, you guys. Take care. Enjoy your Wednesday. Journey on a journey is outwards. Take care, folks. See ya.